Yeah, good morning. Welcome to another day of training of softwares. So, as I have shared before, our vision is to help at least 1,000 prospects in finding suitable software programming related jobs by the end of December 2021. As of now, we have around 60 candidates or members in the level 1 training and 1 member in the level 2 training. So there are totally 4 levels of training, and after the 4th level they qualify to go to the qualify for the job assistance. So let us start off with the content. So on the previous class we had a Zoom interactive session where we covered a little of CSS elements. We covered in CSS we covered margin and padding. So let me open the notepad file. So this is what we created during it. Let me also open the. So this is what we did. See, we also covered a little bit of colors. So we covered color, padding and margin. So that is what we did. So now I think what we'll do is we'll start off with class and ID, because again these two are extremely important in creating web applications or websites. These will also be used in as identifiers or indicators when we move on to jQuery or JavaScript. So it is quite important to learn and understand what is class and ID with respect to CSS, with respect to cascading style sheets. The word class, of course, is also used in PHP. You have a class even over here, like it comes in the object-oriented programming method. So the class that I'm mentioning here in CSS is completely different from that. The class and ID, I'll give a small background about it. I'll open the code and then I'll tell. So here the idea of class and ID is, if you want to identify, let us say you want to identify this particular element, this particular div element, and you want to apply some styling to it, or you want to apply some behavior to it, or you want to recognize it when the website is loading. For example, when this website is loading, you want to recognize or you want to do something with that particular element, then you can use either a class or an ID. A class or an ID is basically in simple terms you can say that it is naming of that particular element. You are assigning a name to that particular element. So both class and ID is a way by which you can name a particular element. But what is the difference between class and ID? Both of them will do the exact same thing. That is, you can specify a particular name to a particular element. For example, you can specify a name to this div which starts here and which ends here. You can specify a name to this paragraph tag which starts here and which ends over here. Okay. So when you give this name, the difference between class and ID is that class can be repeated. You can repeat the same class name. Let us say you call the class name as ABC. You can repeat the same class name multiple times on the page. Whereas ID, you cannot repeat it. Okay, you're supposed to use it only once. So if you repeat the same ID, let's say XYZ, ID is equal to XYZ. If you repeat it more than once, the web or the browser or the web application will recognize only one of them, and in few of the cases it will not even recognize, because it's been used multiple times. It will even create an error. So you use class if you want to repeat in multiple places. You will use ID if you want it to be used only in a particular place. You use an ID. Now, for example, since there is only one div here, okay, I can use an ID because there is only one element of div in this whole page here. In this entire page, you can see there's only one div element. But however, you can see there are two paragraph elements. So the first paragraph element is starting here and ending here. The second paragraph element is starting here and ending here. So there are two paragraph elements. So here you can use the same class to identify that particular element. So now let us see, how do you write a class? Okay, how do you define a class? So what you will have to do is, here you can see that you put a style here. Okay, in the same format you can also define a class. So let me define a class. So you will say class is equal to, and you can write like this. You can just put a name for the class. Okay, and I will call it, just you can name it anything you want. I will call it div class. Okay, the name that you want to give can be chosen in any way you want, but I am just calling it as div class. Now what this means is, this particular div element has been assigned a class and the name of that class is div class. This is the name of the class. Now how can I use this? What can I do with this? I can assign these styles. Okay, whatever styles I am giving, that is red color, font weight I said is bold. Here you can see red color and font weight bold for all the inner elements. Okay, though I put it on div, it has actually affected on the inner elements. The reason is because that is how CSS works. Cascading style sheets. You apply the style on the top and the styles get, it falls, cascades down, or like a waterfall, it goes down into the inner elements. So the red color, the bold, and padding and the margin on the left side, the gap on the left side, we saw that there were two things separating here. So what you can do is with this div class, with the name that you have given here, class, you can actually assign these styles from another place. So for example, you can do this. You can open a style tag here and close a style tag here. Now style tag is also part of CSS. This is also cascading style sheet, style part, style tag. That is, if you want to assign styles to certain elements in this HTML over here, in the body tag over here, you can actually do it even in another place, and you can relate or link this style that you put here with the particular elements with this class name. Okay, so how you do that is, here you will have to just say a single dot div class. Okay, open curly bracket and close curly bracket. So what you are doing here is, with this dot you are saying that it is basically a class. If it is an ID that you used on the top, you will put a hash symbol. Okay, if it's an ID, you will put a hash symbol. If it's a class, you will put a dot symbol. So once you do this here, you can literally remove the entire thing from here to here. That is colors, fonts, the padding, everything. I'm just cutting it from there. I've removed everything from inside style here, and I can come here in between this div class and place the whole thing over here. Okay. So basically what I'm saying, what I've done is, I have put a class for this div with the name as div class, and I'm putting the entire style over here. I'm calling that particular class here, or I'm mentioning that class here inside the style element, and I'm putting the whole color over here. So if I save this, if I've not made any mistakes, it should work correctly. So if I save this and I refresh it, this thing should remain as it is. It should not change. Though I've removed it from here and I put it here, this particular styling here must not change. So let me save this file and save, and I'll come here and refresh it. Okay, thank God it has not changed. So now let me try to instead of red, let me try using blue here, for example. Okay, I am using blue here. So ideally what should happen, if it's right, this whole color here should change to blue. Okay, so now let me save this and let me refresh it, and you can see it has changed to blue. So what has happened here is, I have assigned a class over here. Okay, now let me just try to do something and see if it works. Okay, I'll just take the same class and I will put inside table. Okay, I have put the same class inside table. That means for the table, I am saying that the color should become blue. For the table, the font should become bold. There should be a padding of 30 left and margin of 30 left. Okay, 30 left margin. So if I've saved it already, I did a Ctrl S on my keyboard, and if I refresh this page, what should happen is, this particular table here should receive whatever styling options that I am using here also. Now thing is, table of course is a different type of a HTML element. So let's see if all the styles that I used on the top here, over here, that is for this div element, whether they will apply for the table also, because I've used the same class over here also for the table. Okay, so let me try to refresh this and see how this particular table which is displayed here behaves. Okay, let's see. Okay, it behaved exactly the same. That is, the colors have changed to blue, just as the above one, and also you can see there is a padding and a margin on the left side, and also the font has become bold. So that is what happens with a class. Now let me change the same thing to an ID. So I told before that ID has to be used only once. You're not supposed to be using ID twice. If you're putting ID for a particular element, you're supposed to restrict that name, whatever name you're giving inside here, only to a specific unique value. You're not supposed to give same ID in more than one place. It should be only in one place. And I also told that if it's an ID, you have to put a hash symbol here. Now according to HTML CSS, this is not supposed to work. Okay, even if it works, this particular coloring is not supposed to come for both the locations. It's only supposed to come either for this or for this. I think logically, I really do not remember. I think probably it should apply only for the table, because that is coming the second time. This is the first time and this is the second time, or to this. I really don't know. Let's see what happens. So I have saved this. I hit Ctrl S on my keyboard, and when I refresh this, okay, it still works. Actually, it's not supposed to work. Okay, CSS is working, but you would face problem when you are using JavaScript or jQuery on this one. So because I use more of styling and IDs for creating the JavaScript connections, so that is where I keep seeing the errors. But anyway, here it seems to be working, but I would strongly recommend, do not get into a practice of using IDs in same IDs in multiple places, because you will face problems when it comes to JavaScript, jQuery, which comes over here. You will be learning JavaScript over here. After you complete PHP and MySQL, you will come to JavaScript and jQuery. So at this place, there is another ID and class that is used, okay, which is the same ID and class, but for the purpose that you use it is entirely different. For CSS, it is for applying styles, whereas for this in jQuery, of course, in jQuery also you can apply styles with jQuery ID and class, but the main purpose of creating this is so that you can do something with that div element or paragraph element. Anyway, so I made a mistake here, so I'll roll this back, one of them to class, and I'll call this as div class, and I'll call this as table ID. Okay, I'll just call it as table ID. Why? Because it's an ID. I'm just for the sake of learning, I'm making it as table ID. See, now what will happen if I save this div class is of course defined over here, and it is class here. I put as class here, whereas I'm putting as hash here. So ideally it should not work, because I'm saying that it is an ID, but here I am saying that it is a class, so it should not work. The same thing here for table. I have told ID is equal to table ID, and I have not given any style here. I am not told anything about table ID here. Okay, so this should also not work. So when I save this and when I refresh this page, both of these styles should not be there. Why it will not be there? Because as I said, one reason is I told class, but I am saying it's an ID. So your HTML CSS should not recognize that it is the same thing, though the names are same. And here I have not even given anything about the table over here. So both of them should not work. So let's see if I will be right this time. So if I refresh the page, yeah, so both of them have not worked. Neither has the first one worked nor the second one. First one, because I called it a class, but below I told it's an ID. So there's a clash. It's not the same thing. Whereas, of course, for the second one here, I have not even defined anything. So obviously it's not going to come. So how can we correct it? So first thing is I'll change this to a class. I'll put a dot here so that this class here is the same over here. Okay, it's a class. The second thing that I have to do is I have to take this table ID. So table ID is an ID there. So I'll put a hash table ID. Okay, I put a table ID, and I'll copy this thing here. Of course, I can do anything I want. I'll keep it as the bottom one as green. I'll keep it as bold, and I'll increase the padding as 50 and margin as anything 100. Okay, I'll keep it as 100. So basically what that means is it will total it up, that is 150, and it will move to the right side. So this will go 150 to the right side, and the upper div will go 60. These two will go 60 to the right side. So it will almost, this will go twice the distance of this top one on the top. So now let me save this and refresh this, so you can see the same thing has happened. So this has gone to this distance, whereas this has gone to a greater distance to the right side, and it has become green. So this is how you will use class and IDs in for styling, for applying different styles in HTML. So we have covered this portion. Now I made a mistake here. What is the mistake that I made? I have not logged into training.rejola.com/software. So let me log in there, and let me. Okay, so my high incident last week was I learned React Native. My low incident last week was the barcode scanner did not work well. That is, when I'm making an app, the barcode scanner did not work well in that. So that's a low thing. I'm still figuring out how to fix it. And what I learned is, of course, again, React Native. And yes, I have spent considerable amount of time in everything, and I'm happy that I've done everything well by God's grace. And I'm saving this also. Okay. So now once I come in here, I'm going to click on my project. I'm going to start my project. Okay, and I will, so we have learned that if you keep 1 hour it doesn't work, so I've kept more than an hour. And we are learning CSS. We are still learning the concepts of CSS. And we have discussed about class and ID, both of this, correct? We discussed about both of them. Okay. So class, ID, style, yes, we have discussed about style, where you can apply style on the top, and we can even apply style separately. We have discussed about margin and padding. Height is, of course, the height and width, both of them are similar. So what I'll do, and border, probably I'll use height, width, color is already done. So we can learn all these height, width, background color, and color border. It's all the same. There is nothing complicated in this. So what I'll do is, first let me save this CSS class and ID. So they'll keep it as class and ID. Okay. So coming to class and ID. What we will do now is we'll pick up on this height and width. Okay, so let me put height and width for this. Okay, so for example, if I come here and if I put a height for this particular div element, so this entire div element will get a height. So I can do it over here. Okay, I can even do it in a new line inside the curly brackets. So I put it inside the curly brackets. So I'll say height is 200 pixels. Okay, 200 pixels. So this one should become bigger. So this photo should move down. Okay, so let me save this and I refresh this. So okay, the photo has not moved down. 1 second. So height is 200. Let me increase it to 300 pixels. The class height, I'm increasing it to 300 pixels. No, it's not changing. Div class style. I don't need a style here. Remove that. So height, inside style, height is 300 pixels. I have margin left. 300 pixels is not working, and I don't know why it's not working. So let's see why it's not working. Or is it because the image 300 pixel height? So let me just try to inspect this element and see why the 300 pixel, whether 300 pixels is there. So div class 960 So what happened is I have saved this file as CSS class ID. So you can see here in this div there is no height at all. Okay, the reason is I have still opened the CSS intro file. I have saved it as CSS class ID. So what I have to do is I have to open this one. So let me first, okay, I'll close this over here. Let me first rename this to the today's date. I made a mistake here. So 20th date, and I need to open this file, not the previous file. So now you can see that the height has come. Okay, so that's the mistake that I made. And let me open this in the notepad once again. So open notepad. Okay, so now you can see that the height is applying. So this height that I put here, it's coming. So it's moved down all the way to the other. The photo has gone down, so the height is coming. Okay, and let me put a width which is very small, so that you know what will happen when I put the width very small is this should ideally go down. So let me put a width as 40 pixel, which is quite small. 40 pixel is quite small. If 300 is this, 40 should be quite small. And if I refresh this, you can see that the it has got wrapped. The words have got wrapped. So to see it exactly how it is, I mean where is the border coming, you can actually see it over here. So if you come here, you can see that the 40 pixel is actually less than the size of training and assistance. You can see that it is much less than that. So you can actually increase, instead of 40 probably you can keep it around 80. So let's try what comes if it is 80. Okay, and I'll refresh this, and now if I come on the div, you can see that the blue vertical line is going outside the assistance. So instead of probably the height, as you can also see that the div dot class 110 into 300. So you can see that it is 110 by 300. Now why is it 110 and why is it not 80? So if you can see here, I've given it as 80, but it says the div size is 110. The reason is because there is a padding of 30. So it is 80 and there is an inner space of 30, and that is why it's coming a total of 80 plus 30 is 110. Okay. So if I remove this padding here, if I remove this particular padding here, and if I save it and I refresh this again, and if I come back to this, you'll see the div is correctly coming as 80 by 300. So whatever height and width you have given, because there's no more padding, there's no gap inside the div or the space inside the div. So let me reduce the height. Instead of 300, I'll make it as 100, so that it looks much smaller and the photo need not go down much. So if I refresh this, you can see the photo has come up, and that is where the 100 is, 180 has come. So we have also covered the height and width. Okay. So next what we will cover is we will cover the background color. Okay, we'll color background color and border. These two things we'll cover next. Okay. So what I'll do is, let me write it down here. So we'll cover background color and border. So these two things we will cover it next time. Okay. So I'll just save this because I have to save this. This is the only way that we will know which particular part your training on self-learning is happening. So please do this without fail. I made a mistake today by not signing in first here. I'll probably keep a reminder from now so that I do not forget. So once you're through with the learning, please learn at least for 8 hours per day. You have to be able to do it fast and finish off the training fast. I am of course going very slow. I would expect you to do it much faster than what I am doing. The reason is because I am just spending around 20-30 minutes every day, but you should be able to spend around 8 hours and cover the topics much faster and progress well. So let me end today's session. Okay, so we know what we are going to cover the next time. So background color and border is what we are going to cover the next time. So thank you all very much, and wishing you all the best, and do well, spend more than 8 hours every day and be successful. Thank you very much.